Before We Were Yours by Lisa Wingate. Straight out of the gate, I'm telling you, I love this book. It was a complete sleeper hit. I did not expect to like it. So thank you to my mother for suggesting that we listen to an audiobook, because that's what we would do, is when we go on road trips, we listen to an audiobook, and she obviously wasn't feeling my music. So I put this book on, and there you go, happily ever after. I will admit that I fell asleep at the very beginning of it. I don't think that has much to do with the book, although that is one of my complaints, is I thought the beginning was a little prolonged. But I think it had more to do with the fact that I've been up since 5:45 in the morning and I get car sick. So as the passenger in the car, I said, I'm gonna take a nap. Anywho, I don't know how I came across this book, which is not abnormal. That's my MO. I do remember being attracted to it because it dealt with adoption. Was I wrong about the adoption aspect, or what? Because yes, there's adoption in it, but in a totally different sense than I was expecting. The deal is, it's actually based off of true events. In the early 1900s, like the 1920s, this woman named Georgia Tann began to kidnap children in order to sell them for profit. But she did it via adoption. There's a lot that I did do research on her, although Wikipedia, we know, is not like hand-to-God truth. There was a point where she was working with the Tennessee Children's Society. Some of her adoptions were legal, but at some point she decided, you know what, there's money in them there hills. So she would kidnap poor children, whether it is convincing their parents to sign them over in order to relieve them of debt, taking them from their nursery schools and pretending that they're being taken by social services because their families couldn't take care of them. There are so many reasons, or even like in this book where the parents, they're gypsies, they're river gypsies. They go to the hospital to have their kids, and then she convinces them that their children were stillborn. So these new babies that they just had, she actually just stole them, told them that the kids didn't survive, and there you go. But then kind of in the midst of all the chaos, she convinced, at least the father, I'm not sure, maybe the mother too, convinced him to sign away the rights to his other kids because it would mean that they wouldn't have to pay hospital bills. So yeah, she just found various ways to kidnap kids. She just did what she did. She had the police involved, she had lawmakers involved, she had all kinds of people. So this book, though, it involves the Foss children. So there's 5 of them. There's Rill, Camellia, Lark, Fern, and Gabion. And then on the other hand, or in another timeline, there is a woman named Avery Stafford. And so she comes from a very wealthy family, and her dad's a politician. And so they are at this care facility because I guess, this is the part I slept through. Something about healthcare reform or whatnot, and the inequality of how certain people are treated in the kinds of old homes they go to. And so she encounters this woman who mistakes her for someone else, and it draws her in to Rill's story. So Rill is the main character. She's 12, so she's the main character in the 1920s era where she and her siblings get kidnapped. And then there's Avery, who is like, how am I connected? Because this woman that she meets at the old folks' home knows her grandma Judy. And so on one hand, she's just incredibly intrigued. She's a little nosy. I think her imagination gets a hold of her and takes her places maybe it shouldn't. But it's also a concern for her family because her dad is battling cancer, and then she is being groomed to take his place. And so part of her is like, maybe I should check this out just to make sure we don't have skeletons in our closet that somebody is going to dig out and ruin our political careers over. But let's talk about Rill for a second. The story opens with her mother, Queenie, having twins. It's a really difficult birth. Her father, Briney, takes Queenie to the hospital. While they wait, they're on their riverboat, these policemen come and take them off the boat. Then they are delivered to one of the children's homes that Georgia Tann has set up. It's led by Mrs. Murphy. Here's some spoiler alerts, okay? So when Briney takes Queenie to the hospital, he puts Rill in charge. He says, basically, take care of the kids. What happens is they get to this children's home, and they're very, very attractive children. This seemed to be a thing for Georgia Tann, is blonde hair, blue eye. These are the ones that she would parade in front of people. Like, she did so much advertising for adoption. And so these are the kids that she put at the forefront. Camellia is the next oldest. She has dark hair. I don't really know if she's ugly, but they keep calling her ugly. I don't know if it's because they're just mean or because she's not as attractive as her siblings. Camellia sort of gets taken out of the group whenever it comes to parading them in front of potential adoptees. I say adoptees because really it's more like buying, because none of this is on the books. Georgia Tann would falsify names, she would falsify dates, she would destroy documents. She did not want children to be traced. Sometimes children were legitimately handed over because the families couldn't take care of them, and then she would adopt them out, and then she would completely destroy any trace of them ever being there. And so then the biological families could never find them because nobody could ever verify that these kids had been there, and then without their real names. Anyways, here are the spoilers. The house is run by a woman named Mrs. Murphy. And then Mrs. Murphy has a cousin named Riggs. And I don't know if he is mentally handicapped or if that's just the way that the story was read. Again, I fell asleep for bits and pieces. But he basically is a child molester. And this is introduced very early. Actually, what I thought was really great was when we're first introduced to him, the kids have first arrived and they're put in this basement bedroom. And it's the only one that has a lock. And so somehow he's able to come in, and Rill is like, what is going on here? Who is this person? So we're thinking, oh, something bad is going to happen. And then he leaves and we find out that he has just put peppermints on all of their pillows. So we're like, oh, maybe he's just creepy, but he's not a bad dude. But we do learn that, yes, he is a child molester. However, Mrs. Murphy wants nothing to do with that. She will not believe anybody. Camellia, when her siblings are taken to a viewing, because of the peppermints, she thinks that he is their friend. And so while her siblings are gone, I don't know if she seeks him out. I don't know if she just goes somewhere where he can get her, because there are stories. They're like, do not let him get you alone because XYZ will happen. In some capacity, he gets a hold of her. He rapes her. And then we all know I like spoilers, obviously. So I kind of read up on things beforehand. My impression was that there's a longer period of time that lapsed between the rape and her disappearance. It's really not. For some reason, she doesn't like baths in the first place, but so the day it happens, they have to go take a bath. She freaks out. They take her to the closet, and we never see her again. Spoiler 2, Gabion gets adopted the same night that they have that viewing, and then another family comes and takes Lark, and then not too long after, Fern gets adopted. So those three are like 4 and under. Fern apparently cannot live without Rill, and so the family comes and adopts her as well. So that's the big spoiler. But the thing is, Rill has such guilt about the fact that she could not save her siblings, that she could not keep them together, she could not take care of them, that she is almost afraid to see Bryony and Queenie again. Because while they're at this children's home, when Bryony and Queenie had gone to the hospital, he had put this guy named Zed, or Zed, I don't really know how you pronounce it, in charge, and then I guess he will take kids in. So he had actually placed this new guy, Silas, to keep watch over them. And so while they're at the children's home, Zed and Silas track them down, and Silas is going to break her out, but she had recently learned, like, that day. So she sees him, he talks to her in the morning. In the afternoon, she learns that Fern is supposed to be being returned because she she's wetting the bed, she's too hard to handle, and so she's like, I can't leave. Like, I cannot leave until Fern is here. It turns out Fern wasn't being returned, it was Rill was being adopted. So however many weeks later, this is something else that Georgia Tann would actually do. She would extort money from her adopters because I don't know if in the beginning they knew it wasn't legal or what, but she would go to them and she would basically say, look, the parents want the kids back, and so the only way we can stop this is by you giving me money for legal fees. So this is what she does. She comes to the Seviers and she's like, I need money. And Rill is thinking, well, this is the best time to get out of here because they're going to send us back anyways and we don't want to go back. She is able to escape with Fern to find Bryony. However, when she gets to the boat, she finds out, and the boat's name is Arcadia. So she gets back to the Arcadia and she finds out that Queenie died. Could have been blood poisoning, as I said. It could have been a broken heart, as old Zed said. In any case, Queenie is dead, and Bryony has gone off the deep end. He's become a drunk. Even though he has 2 of his kids back, he doesn't want anything to do with her. But this is a really great moment of the story because it is what Rill needed in order to move on. When they had gotten to the home, Mrs. Murphy and Georgia Tann had renamed all the kids, and her new name was supposed to be May. This was the turning point of her going from Rill to May, because if she had never gone back to Bryony, she would have never seen that she can't have that life anymore. The kids are never going to all be back together. They're never going to have this fantasy, beautiful life upon the Arcadia anymore. And then what happens with the Arcadia is Bryony, it was time to move on. I guess when it comes to seasons, it's best to go to warmer climates because the water doesn't freeze or something. So it was time to move on. He wouldn't do it because Queenie had been buried in those banks. One night, he, I guess, is so drunk and he's so angry that he unmoors the Arcadia. It catches on fire. Rill and Fern are able to escape. They never find Bryony. However, here's a spoiler, Rill suspects that this guy she saw on the bank was Bryony. He just walks away. And so that, again, is important in this turning point because she recognizes she's never going to have Bryony either. Her family is forever broken. And so as much as she loves him, maybe it's just better to be with the Seviers. She and Fern, they return. She is actually expecting them to reject her because I don't know about this day and age, but there was always this stigma about older kids. Everybody wanted a baby. Everybody wanted a young child. And so she was just fully expecting them to want only Fern, not only because she's younger, but because Rill lied. Rill ran away. Rill did bad things. They accept her into the fold, and they provide a really great home for her and her sister. Now, let's go back to Avery. Avery runs into this woman named May, which, I mean, if you're paying attention to the story, you know that it's the same May. May is Rill. And May mistakes her for a person named Fern, and now we're like, just because I've already explained to you the past tense of the story. She has this bracelet, that's what it is. She has this dragonfly bracelet that her grandma Judy gave her. She doesn't actually like it, but she's like, I'm gonna wear it for reasons that I forget because I fell asleep. May steals this bracelet. That gets them into a conversation. Avery sees this picture on May's nightstand. She takes a picture of the picture, and then she goes back to her grandma Judy. Grandma Judy is suffering from Alzheimer's, so we don't get much out of her, but we do get that there's a secret. Of course, me being me and having looked things up, I'm like, well, obviously Judy has to be one of the Foss siblings, but who could it be? And then we get to the point where all the kids are renamed, and they're all renamed after like flowers or spring things. And I'm like, well, none of that is Judy. So I'm like, well, maybe when she got adopted, They changed her name again. In any case, it's a really great mystery, and we keep moving forward. And Avery then does a lot of snooping, and she ends up meeting this guy named Trent Turner because Judy had some appointment to meet someone named Trent Turner. And he's like, I have no idea what you're talking about. It might have been my grandpa, but my grandpa just died. They come to the conclusion that perhaps his grandfather had papers for Judy. And this is probably my biggest issue with the book. Judy, not in her right mind, not able to travel. Avery, power of attorney. She is an attorney, but she has power of attorney for her grandmother. Yet Trent Turner will not give her this paperwork. And I'm like, for one, I mean, because it's like he made a deathbed promise to his grandfather to only give, because this wasn't the only person he had paperwork for her. So he made this deathbed promise that he would only give the papers to the people for whom they belonged. So he just denies Avery any access. He will not give her any information. And so I'm like, lady, you're a lawyer. Like, can't you figure out a way around this? Can't you get the authorities involved? You have power of attorney. This is paperwork for your grandmother. Like, to me, it doesn't make sense. It felt like a way for Wingate to draw out attention. Trey, no, do I keep calling him Trey? His name is Trent. Trent becomes the new love interest, which, did I mention that Avery's engaged? I'll get onto that later. Eventually, she convinces him to give her the information, and it turns out that she had been looking for someone named Shad Foss. Of course, neither one of them knows who Shad Foss is, and since they don't know what we know, we don't realize that Foss is Rill's last name. But still, who's Shad Foss? We keep on going, and here, biggest spoilers of all. Judy was one of the twins that Queenie was having at the beginning of the book. Shad was the boy twin. We never know what happens to Shad. Judy was, as I said at the very beginning of my review, Georgia Tan took the babies, and she was given to a prominent couple who the woman, the mother, had birthed a stillborn. So I'm not quite sure if that woman ever realized this wasn't her real kid, but powerful family, they did what needed to be done, and that is how then Judy became so prominent herself, wealthy, in a position to marry a wealthy man, which then, you go down the line, and we eventually have Avery. Never learn what happened to Gabion. The other sisters do, so Fern and Rill were already together. They do reconnect with Lark. They eventually find Judy, and all of this is because of Trent Turner. And Trent, right now, seems a pretty innocuous character. However, when the Foss children are kidnapped, they're put in a car that already contains 2 children. There's brother and sister. The next day, the sister's already gone, and so it's only the little boy. The kids never tell Rill their names, and so she can only go by the name that Mrs. Murphy and Georgia Tan give them, and so the boy, they just call him Stevie. So if you're following along, boys and girls, Stevie is Trent Turner, because what happened is, at some point in his life, because I guess he's 2 or 3 when he's adopted, I actually don't know, because he's still at the children's home when Rill and company leave. Stevie is adopted early enough in life that he doesn't realize he's adopted. At some point when he's older, I think he's like 18, he finds out he's adopted. He completely shuns his adoptive parents. He locates his real family and changes his name back. So his original name, Trent Turner. And then he essentially becomes a finder. And what he does is he tries to locate people who were affected by Georgia Tan, kids who had gone through a little children's market. So that is Trent Turner. He is an important character because Rill essentially adopts him. Once his sister leaves, she takes him in, keeps him in the fold, and she's like, look, you can count on me. So for me, I was really glad that things turned out well for him because we don't know. That was another thing. When Silas came to break Rill out of the children's home, she's like, not only can I not leave Fern, I can't leave Stevie. but how was she going to get Stevie? We don't know. So I'm glad that in the end things turned out well. I mean, I know this is fiction, and so many things did not turn out well. I mean, the fact is, even with Georgia Tann, she was never convicted of any crimes. She never paid penance for anything. She died before. And even once things came to light, all those powerful lawmakers made it so that she couldn't get in trouble. It's just ridiculous. Like, all of these standards that were then enforced with other orphanages and children's homes, she was exempt from. So it's just crazy. Like, it's super tragic, but that's what makes this book so good, is she doesn't shy away from the hard stuff. She gives us enough good stuff to keep us from weeping everywhere, but there's realities. Like, I think the estimated number of deaths or disappearances of children was like 500, yet that was not the number that she reported. She made, I think, approximately, by today's standards, $1 million off of selling children. The woman made bank. The thing with Avery and her fiance, his name is Elliot, I don't really understand it, but that's because I don't understand being in a relationship with someone out of comfort. But the deal is, they'd grown up together. Eventually they just kept moving up the relationship ladder until they became engaged. And then she meets Trent, and there's this immediate attraction to him. And then eventually she realizes that not only does she not have a passion, or she's not passionate about Elliot, but they have different views on things, particularly regarding this search she's doing into her family's past. He is more concerned about the repercussions it will have on her family politically, and she's like, we didn't do anything wrong. Like, the children involved are the victims here. So she just realized overall they weren't meant to be. Then she connects with Trent, and happily ever after. We do get a scene where, because May was brought to the adults' home because she's in her 90s, but she and Fern had been living together. Fern died. She was discovered with Fern's body. So actually she's introduced us this really crazy lady who was found lying over her dead sister's body. We learned that, the sisters, they used to get together all the time. And so the end ends with Judy and Rill getting to be back together, and then Rill or May being brought to Judy's really nice care facility, and then they can live out the rest of their lives together. And then we get this. It's not an epilogue. I call it an epilogue because it really feels like an epilogue. The book opens with a May perspective, and then it ends with the May perspective, so maybe that's really why they did it. Grant, I slept through the first one, so I can't really tell you much about it, whether we should keep it or not. But the end one, I could have done without. It's not that it took away from the novel, but by that point, I was done. Like, there had been 1 or 2 points where I thought that the book could have ended, but Wingate needed to tie some more emotional, practical plot points off. Like, one thing that I really enjoyed, and at first I got annoyed because, like, why do we have to put this into the story? But as I said, Avery came from wealth. She came from a distinguished family. And so she always viewed herself as, yes, I know I come from privilege, but I worked for what I got. And then she started to realize how much of this came because of my name, rather than me really needing to achieve it on my own. And so that was something that we did need in the end to round out her character arc. And so I like that pointing out of what money can do. This isn't a con per se, as per the writing. This is a con because I'm nosy and I want all the information there is possible. And so I really wished that we had gotten more resolution with some of the other Foss children. On one hand, the whole Camellia thing, I think, could have been expanded a little bit more, because a lot is implied. Camellia, not my favorite character, but you love to hate her because she's so brassy, so sassy. She causes a lot of chaos, and you're just like, dude, Camellia, calm down. But then when she disappears, she's just gone. So we build her up and we get to know her only for her to just disappear. And maybe that's what was supposed to happen. It was just supposed to be a shock factor. But I was like, okay, so she's attacked in the morning, and Rill found Camellia like huddled in a corner, and then she convinces her, we got to keep moving forward. They go to Bath. Camellia has a freak out. I don't really know what happened, because the thing about all these kids in the group home is they're all unreliable. Like, a lot of stuff is word of mouth, and you don't know if you should believe it, because the kids, they'll just say things to cause a stir. The idea is that somehow Camellia had died in the closet. I don't remember what the explanation was as to what happened to Camellia, but then Rill was told that she was like taken out to the swamp to, I guess, be eaten by alligators, or not the swamp, maybe the river. I'm not sure. There's an alligator involved. I guess that's something that really did happen, was kids would just disappear for one reason or another, and they'd be taken care of. I liked how some of these factual events were handled, but at the same time, like with Camellia, I was like, that's it? Like, we're not going to discuss what happened to her. With Mr. Riggs, we're not going to discuss what happened to her when she disappears. Even then, Mrs. Murphy and Georgia Tan are like, she was a figment of your imagination. She never existed. So, I mean, that's kind of cool, because there's no way to prove she did exist. And that was something that I'm assuming was fact. Like, that's what they would do. They would pretend, as I told you, kids were never there. And so it's oh my gosh. I'll get to that later. As per the kids, I wanted to know Gabian. I want to know what happened to Shad. I just wanted to know, where did these boys end up? Did they end up in good homes? Because, again, Georgia Tan would just sell to whoever would give her money. She didn't do background checks, which was another reason that you couldn't keep track of the kids. You didn't really know where they ended up. So did they end up just working on a farm because they were extra hands? Or did they end up in an abusive home with alcoholics? Or, I mean, hello, Mommy Dearest, yeah, she was a movie star, but according to her adopted kid's biography, like, she was not a great woman. Or at least a great mother. Let's get back to Georgia Tan and her cohorts. This book was so great about drawing emotion from me, and I had to keep reminding myself they're not real people. But then I had to remind myself they're based off real people. And then it would occur to me, like, how could people be so terrible? How did Georgia Tan find workers who would be openly abusive to children? What kind of person do you have to be to abuse a child, to treat them like they're nothing? As awful as having a character like Riggs, or a character like Mrs. Murphy, or any of the other employees was, it was sort of imperative because it connected you to the kids. But I just wanted them, I wanted them punished. I almost wanted them to have been real people so that I could have read that they were punished. But of course, if Georgia Tan never suffered recompense, then none of her employees were going to either. I have 2 more points. I got 2 more points. I have 2 more points that I want to talk about. One, it's not good, it's not bad, it's just, it was frustrating for me. And it was similar to how Trent would not give Avery the paperwork that was for her grandmother. And that was how secretive May was about her connection to Judy. But I also didn't understand why May didn't want to reveal details. And this might be a generational thing where, to me, and maybe also because I'm not wealthy, I'm not super privileged, it doesn't matter if there are skeletons in my family's closet, but I don't see adoption as something shameful. I don't see their abduction and basically child selling as something to be ashamed of. And maybe that's what it was, is it just yes, okay, I will go on that limb and say there are things in my family you just don't talk about. So maybe that's what it was. You just don't talk about it. No matter how long ago it happened, you just don't talk about it. And so maybe that's what it was. But I just got really frustrated that, and I know, of course, this also goes towards story, creating tension and mystery and all of that, propelling things forward. But even at the end, when Avery figured out the mystery, so it's almost like a false ending, because we're thinking this whole time that Grandma Judy is somehow related or involved with the kidnapping and adoption of children. And then May, after we discover the papers and all the stuff about the Tennessee Children's Society, May is like, well, actually, Judy was just a mediary. She wasn't related to us. She was just someone who kind of helped get us together and this and that and the other. And then, so that's the false ending where we're like, okay, well, I guess Judy's not actually related, so there's nothing to hide except for the fact that maybe she was involved in child selling. May is like, look, that's it. Thanks. I'm going to sleep now. And then Avery keeps on digging, and she realizes there's something not right here. Once Avery confronts her about the fact that there's more to the story, then she admits that, yeah, Judy's her sister and XYZ, blah, blah, blah. And so that was a little frustrating for me because I just didn't understand why she wasn't more forthcoming. And I could have accepted it more if Wingate had maybe explained it more, given us more of a reason rather than just May didn't want to talk about it, and then Grandma Judy didn't have enough mental capacity to talk about it. It was just frustrating because I was like, just get on with it, just stop stringing me along. The other thing that I want to talk about was the way that the chapters just went together. It's rare for me to like all perspectives equally, and I'm trying to remember if I liked one more than the other in the beginning. I guess, I don't know, because it was so slow that I didn't really care for either. But then once we started picking up and the storylines started to intersect and really help to unravel the mystery together, then I was all for both of them. This was a book I couldn't put down, a book that I will tell everybody to read. I really enjoy history, and I thought that Wingate did an exceptional job at bringing history to life. I thought that Wingate gave us enough truth to make an impact, yet enough fiction to make it interesting, to make it real. This is a book that I might end up reading year after year just because it's so good, and I can't wait to pick up on all those little details that I missed the first time around, to not sleep through the first 3 chapters. Or I don't even know if it's chapters so much as point of views. Points of view? Perspectives. We're going with perspectives. If you've read this, let me know what you thought. If you know of anything similar, let me know. I can't wait to see you next time. I hope you enjoyed this review. Please show the love, share the love. There we go. Bye.